Hey guys, what's going on? Josh here from Polymathics, and today we're going to talk about one of the greatest plays of all time and tragedies, King Lear. Bear with me here, but if you go back in time a little bit, anybody who's watched the show The Tudors on, I think it's either HBO or Showtime. It's a really great show, but it follows the life of Henry VIII, and he was one of the most what's the word? Influential rulers of the Renaissance. And he was also one of the most scandalous monarchs that ever lived. And it was during a time where so many things had happened. So let me give you a brief run through, and then hopefully it all makes sense in the end. So roughly around the 1500s, the Gutenberg press is created. And what that allows is for mass production of texts and books and literature to the masses. And, about half a century after that, Shakespeare is born. And not only that, but so the Gutenberg, or the printing press. Let me back up here. Sorry, I'm getting all. The printing press is one of the key things that ignited the Renaissance, the Enlightenment period, because it allowed for all of this knowledge and information that had been kind of closed away to be spread. Very much like the internet has now allowed the proliferation of knowledge globally. And also it allows it instantaneously, but that's another story. So just like the internet, the printing press came out, and all of a sudden we see all of these Renaissance men start popping up, and then there becomes this struggle between church and state. The church, the Roman Catholic Church in particular, has a lot of power that's intertwined with government at the time. And up until Henry, most of the monarchs just kind of rode that wave, where the king was basically, the ultimate ruler. But what happened with King Henry is that he wasn't satisfied with his first wife. To be honest, he was very scandalous, and to really get an idea, like, watch the Tudors. I'm sure it's a little hyperbolic, but it's still a really good representation of, the character and what was going on. And so, in order to get his way, not only did he have a lot of people beheaded and murdered, but he essentially had the government change politics and the religion of England from Roman Catholicism to Lutheranism. And so what that did was it caused great unrest, and he never had a son, despite the many concubines, or he never had a son who lived to take the throne. And despite the many concubine and wives that he had, he was basically left with daughters. And after he died, his first daughter, Mary, who was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, she was like her mother, who was very devout Catholic. And so she was constantly trying to impose this new, or to bring Catholicism back into the political arena. Unfortunately, because of her father's, what he had done in the past, most people were Protestant, and they had a lot of grievances against the Catholic Church. And so she struggled to bring Catholicism back, and during that time she ended up like persecuting a lot of non-Catholics and killing them, like having them murdered, or not, like beheaded and stuff, and burnt at the stake. And that's where the term Bloody Mary comes from. I don't know if you guys remember, like when you were a kid, it was like Bloody Mary, bloody, and you couldn't like look in a mirror or something. That used to trip me out, by the way. That all comes from Mary the First, who was the daughter of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. She was trying to bring Catholicism back as the main thing of the government, and as a matter of fact, she married the Holy Roman Emperor's son. I think his name was King Philip of Spain, in order to try to close those ties up. But unfortunately, she died an untimely death, like roughly 5 years after she took over the throne, so she didn't have enough time to really get any traction or momentum going. After that happened, the next sort of heir in line was her half-sister, Elizabeth. And Queen Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn, who was, if I'm not mistaken, very heavily Lutheran. And so she came in, and she turned out to be a really great ruler, not necessarily in terms of character, but in the sense like she was a strong monarch who did a lot of things for England and helped the nation stay strong. She used her womanly charms to court many different nations and courtiers, and even though she never got married, that's why she's considered to be like the what do you call it, the Virgin Queen. She used those alliances to make England stronger. But so what happened? What happened was, upon her death, the next person in line of succession was King James of Scotland. He was a Scottish king, or he came from Scotland, and this is the same King James as the King James Bible. So those of you who are who have read the King James Bible, this is the king who had that all kind of worked out and set up. And the purpose was so that the word of God, it could be spread out throughout Britain. Oh, that's another thing. So before it was Scotland and England, but then when Elizabeth died and James took over, Scotland and England became Great Britain. And so what does this mean? What does this have anything to do with Shakespeare or King Lear? That's all the background, and that's the boring stuff. It's out of the way now. Shakespeare lived, and more specifically, he wrote during the times of Elizabeth, and when she passed, he wrote during the times of both of those monarchs, both Elizabeth and James. And so he was very aware of all the conflicts and problems that this church versus state had caused, not only for the royals, but how it trickled down and affected the nation itself, right? England and its people were crippled because of this ongoing religious identity crisis that the country had. And so so what we see in a lot of his plays is like the tragedies and things like that, like he has warnings not only for the people but for the monarchs on how to rule, and that's where